The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when the little girl stepped out of the small wooden cabin, clutching a dented tin bucket. The morning air was cool and soft, carrying the smell of dry grass and dust. She was no older than 9, her dress faded and patched in places, her blonde hair tied up in a messy braid. Her name was Clara. Every morning, before the world was properly awake, Clara walked the long dirt path to the well that stood near the edge of the valley. It wasn't close, about a mile from her cabin, and the walk wasn't easy, especially with a heavy bucket on the way back. But she did it without complaint. Her mother, Mary, had fallen ill weeks ago, too weak to leave her bed, and the well was the only source of clean water for miles. The neighbors had long since moved away, the war and drought driving most families to the towns farther west. So Clara and her mother were alone. That morning, as Clara walked, her boots kicked up little clouds of dust. The sky was still streaked with pale pink, and the world felt quiet, the kind of quiet that almost hummed. Sometimes she talked to herself on the way, or hummed a tune her mother used to sing while cooking stew. It made the walk feel less lonely. When she reached the well, she set the bucket down, wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, and began to draw the water. The rope squeaked against the wood, the bucket splashed as it hit the bottom, and the cold water sparkled in the light. She smiled faintly, proud of herself. But that morning was different. As she started to turn home, she heard the sound of hooves, slow and steady, coming down the trail. Her little heart thumped faster. No one ever came this way anymore. From behind the trees, a horse appeared, a tall brown stallion, and on its back rode a man. His hat shaded most of his face, but his build was broad, his shoulders strong, and the way he held the reins looked sure and calm. He stopped when he saw her. "Mornin'," he said in a deep voice that was kind but carried power. Clara froze for a second, clutching the bucket handle. "Mornin'," she said softly. He tilted his head a little, studying her. "That's a mighty big bucket for such a little lady. You out here alone?" Clara's throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she should answer. Her mother always said to be careful of strangers, but the man's eyes, when she finally dared to look, didn't look cruel. They looked gentle. "I come for water," she said carefully. "For my mama," he nodded slowly. "That's so. She's sick." Clara nodded. "Yes, sir, real bad. Can't get out of bed." The cowboy climbed down from his horse, his boots crunching against the dirt. "That's tough, sweetheart," he said quietly. "You been walking all this way by yourself every day?" Clara shrugged. "Somebody's gotta do it." He smiled a little, impressed by her courage. "You remind me of my little sister back home. Tougher than most grown men." He looked down the path where she came from. "You mind if I walk with you? Make sure you get home safe." Clara hesitated, but something in her heart said it was okay. She nodded slowly. The cowboy picked up his horse's reins and walked beside her. He carried the water bucket with one hand like it weighed nothing. They walked in silence for a bit before he asked, "What's your mama's name?" "Mary," she said. "She used to work for the Bakers' ranch before they moved away." "I knew the Bakers," he said with a faint smile. "Good folks. I'm Luke Harlan. Got a small ranch past the ridge. Haven't been in these parts for a while." Clara listened carefully. "You got horses?" He chuckled. "Plenty. Maybe one day you can come see 'em." Her eyes lit up a little at the thought. It had been a long time since she'd seen anything exciting. When they reached the cabin, Luke saw the place was worn, the porch steps broken, the roof patched with tin, the smoke from the chimney thin and weak. Inside, through the open door, he could see a woman lying on a cot, pale and frail, her chest rising slowly. Mary's eyes fluttered open when she heard the footsteps. "Clara," she whispered. "Who's that?" Clara set the bucket down and hurried to her mother's side. "Mama, this is Mr. Luke. He helped me bring the water." Luke took off his hat, stepping quietly inside. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Didn't mean to intrude, just wanted to make sure your girl got home safe." Mary gave a weak smile. "Thank you, sir. She's all I got left." Luke's heart tugged at that. He could see how much the sickness had taken from her, her cheeks hollow, her lips dry. He crouched beside the bed. "You been seen by a doctor?" She shook her head faintly. "Doctor moved away. I didn't have money anyhow." Luke looked around. The place had little food, no medicine in sight. He glanced at Clara, who sat beside her mother, holding her hand with worry in her eyes. "I got some medicine back at my ranch," Luke said after a pause. "And food. If you'll let me, I can bring some things by." Mary tried to protest. "You don't owe us nothing, sir." Luke smiled softly. "Ain't about owing, it's about helping." He left that day but came back by sundown, his horse loaded with supplies. He brought flour, beans, a jar of honey, and a few bottles of medicine. He even brought a small loaf of bread, still warm. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Luke just nodded. "You rest, Clara, and I'll take care of things." Over the next few days, Luke came by every morning. He fixed the roof, chopped firewood, and brought water from the well so Clara didn't have to walk that long road alone. Sometimes he told her stories about wild mustangs, about storms he'd ridden through, about a world beyond the hills. Clara would listen wide-eyed, her little heart slowly filling with hope again. Mary's health began to improve little by little. The color returned to her cheeks, and one morning she managed to sit up and smile. "I think the good Lord sent you," she told Luke. He smiled. "Maybe he sent Clara first. She's the one who kept everything going." Clara blushed and giggled, hiding behind her braid. Weeks passed, and soon the little cabin didn't feel lonely anymore. Luke had become part of their small world, fixing fences, bringing supplies, teaching Clara how to ride his gentle mare named Daisy. She'd laugh as the horse trotted, her braids flying behind her, her voice echoing across the fields. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky orange, Clara sat beside the well again. Luke rode up just like that first day. "Fetchin' water again, huh?" he teased with a smile. She grinned. "Old habits." He laughed softly, then looked thoughtful. "You know, Clara, I was thinking maybe your mama and you might like to stay at my ranch for a while. More space, fresh air, plenty of hands to help." Clara's eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "Really." That evening, when he told Mary, she was quiet for a long time, her eyes glistening. "You've done so much already," she said softly. Luke looked at her kindly. "Ma'am, sometimes family ain't just the ones we're born with. Sometimes it's the ones we find when life gets hard." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "Then maybe it's time Clara had more than sickness and struggle." A few days later, they packed what little they had, a few clothes, Mary's Bible, and Clara's favorite rag doll, and rode with Luke to his ranch. From that day on, Clara never had to walk to the well alone again. There were always hands to help, laughter in the yard, and the smell of bread baking from the kitchen. And every time Luke saw that little girl running through the fields, her hair glowing in the sunlight, he'd remember the first time he saw her. A tiny figure by the well, carrying the weight of the world in a bucket too heavy for her small hands. Now, she was free, and somehow, in helping her, he'd found something he didn't even know he was missing, a family and a reason to stay.